You have the option to watch as I use HTML to build a website throughout this course, or you can code alongside me and we can build a website together. Whatever works best with your goals, learning style, and time. When building a website, start small and add on as you go. This is a process called iterative development, where you write some code, get it to work as you want, and then repeat the process, writing more code. By focusing on one reasonably sized piece at a time, you can better design, build, and try out each page. We'll start with the welcome page that introduces our site. It's often called a home page because it's where the user arrives when typing in or linking to the website. This page doesn't look all that amazing, nor will any of the pages we create in this course. As we mentioned earlier, it's CSS that gives our web pages style. We'll improve the look of these pages later in this series when we cover CSS, but we first need the structure and content of the pages marked up with HTML. Are we ready to build? If you would like to code along, start by opening up a text editor. If you are on a Windows system, type Notepad into the search box next to the Start menu to open Notepad. If you are on a Mac, use Finder to open the Text Edit app. Note that Text Edit will try to read and process your HTML. To turn that off, use the Format menu and select Make Plain Text. I'm using Windows, so I have Notepad open. In the text editor, we can type our content and mark it up with any HTML elements. We start with the header, but we haven't talked much about headers yet, so let's just use the P or paragraph element. We type the opening tag with the name of the element in lowercase, left angle bracket, P, right angle bracket. As you may have noticed, I've upped my font in Notepad so it's easier to see in the video. Then we type the text we want to display. Welcome to the Virtual Pet Cafe. And then the closing tag, left angle bracket / P, right angle bracket. We now have the first HTML for our website. Let's add 2 more paragraphs. If you don't want to type all of the text, scroll down below this video to the lesson links at the bottom of this lesson. There you can link to the code for this coding along exercise and copy the text from there. We again start with our opening P tag. I'll paste the content, then add the closing P tag. Add 1 more paragraph, opening tag, content, and closing tag. Don't worry about any extra spaces or empty lines, sometimes called whitespace. Feel free to space it out so it's easy to read. The browser treats extra whitespace between words as 1 space and ignores whitespace at the beginning, ending, or outside of an element. Now let's save the document. Save it somewhere you can find it again. Maybe in your Documents folder or on your desktop. Create a new subfolder called Pet Cafe, all lowercase. This folder will be the primary folder or root of our website. All of the files for our website should reside in this folder. Double-click on the folder to select our new folder. Then, since this is our home page, we'll name the file index.html, all lowercase. Each of our web page documents should have an HTML extension. If you are on a Mac, after entering the file name, it may ask you to confirm that you really wish to use .html as the extension. We do. Now that we've saved the document, let's try it out in the browser. Open the File Explorer on Windows or Finder on the Mac and navigate to the saved file. On my system, it's Documents, Pet Cafe, index.html. Note that on Windows computers, you might have trouble seeing the file extension. That's because Windows hides these extensions by default. To turn on extensions in this version of Windows, at the top of the File Explorer, select View and check File Name Extensions. When you find the index.html file, double-click on it. Your default browser should open, read the document, and display the web page. Cool! Our content is shown in paragraphs as we intended. Before we add a few more elements to our document, Let's go back to the slides and talk about document file names. Here are some tips for defining folder and file names for our HTML documents. Be sure to name folders and files with all lowercase. This is because some web servers are case-sensitive and may not recognize Pet Cafe with a lowercase c and Pet Cafe with an uppercase C as the same folder. Standardizing on lowercase ensures you won't run into casing issues later. Don't use spaces in folder or file names. Spaces aren't allowed in URLs, and since we include the folder and file name in the URL, we shouldn't use spaces in the folder or file names. Select a word separator and use it consistently. A hyphen or dash is the recommended separator, not a space, not an underscore, not a capital letter. Many search engines treat hyphens as word separators, so your file names will be better understood. Be descriptive. As you create more files for your website, they'll be easier to find with descriptive names. Now let's jump back to our code. I've moved my text editor to the left and the browser to the right so we can see both windows. In the text editor at the bottom, let's add 2 input elements. After every change, we need to save. In the text editor, select the File menu and click Save, or use the Ctrl+S shortcut. In the browser window, click the Refresh button to reload the saved HTML file. We now see 2 text boxes for user entry and can type in any text. Looking at the web page layout, notice that the P element inserts line breaks around its content. The input element does not. Wouldn't this look better if the 2 text boxes were on separate lines? We can nest some HTML elements inside other HTML elements to improve our layout. Going back to the text editor, let's add a P element around each input element. Here's the opening tag. The input element is our content, and the closing tag. Same for the other input element. First the opening tag, the content, then the closing tag. Save, Ctrl+S. Then in the browser, click to refresh. Now our text boxes are on separate lines. Nice! Looking back at the text editor, as our web pages get more complex, it may be difficult to see our nesting and ensure we have appropriate opening and closing tags. Consider using tabs or spaces to indent the elements, making it easier to see the structure of our document. I'll put the nested content on a separate line and add 2 spaces to the nested input elements, here and here. Now that's a bit easier to read. Save the changes. Looking at the browser, refresh, and notice that the extra white space in the document has no effect on the display. We've now built our first web page! Yay! Going back to the slides. So, we don't need any fancy tools to create the pages for our website. Any text editor will do. But tools can be helpful. We'll look at some tools a bit later in this course. All documents for a website should be in a single folder, with subfolders as needed. Opening a document with an HTML extension automatically opens it in your default browser. The browser reads the HTML elements and displays the web page. The browser ignores extra white space, so add spaces, tabs, and lines as needed for readability. We often nest HTML elements inside other HTML elements to achieve the desired layout. Now we've seen the basics of using HTML elements, let's look at HTML attributes next.